will share the slides and begin to explain what we have been doing to generate these principles and what the principles represent. We're talking about global health, but I think it's important for us to contextualize where we are at the moment. One can say that the notion of global health, it's generally contested sometimes. We do not have, a unified and agreed definition of what global health is, but at least global health has presented itself as something that is trying to promote greater equity for everyone all over the world in issues regarding health. But this reality that we call global health, this space, today we can say it's under attack. So, it's under attack from various, angles. Multilateralism is suffering many attacks. Funding is reduced. And yet at the same time, we notice that in times of crisis, there are always calls for solidarity. But what do we really mean? And especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, we all noticed that, yes, whereas communities, small groups showed solidarity towards each other, people helping somebody who is sick by actually going to do shopping for them or trying to assist. On the international level, a lot of solidarity was spoken about, but in reality, little was achieved. So much so that, countries were busy receiving booster vaccine doses, while others were struggling to get their first dose. Now, this situation that made the concept of solidarity in global health enter into, crisis or even questioning has actually been exacerbated by the current cuts in funding, withdrawals from multilateralism. And it is generating a climate whereby nationalisms are beginning to become strong and international collaboration seems to be weaker. And if anything at all, countries seem to be going more for bilateral collaborations. Amidst all this, there were the negotiations for the pandemic agreement, which ended in 2025. And if you read through this pandemic agreement, you will see that solidarity, or the principle of solidarity, was actually encoded in the pandemic agreement. Now, the question becomes, how does this idea of solidarity, which is often invoked, it is now in the pandemic agreement, how do we actually pass from the rhetoric to real practice? And what we've been doing is trying to understand what people think and expect of solidarity in different parts of the world. Above all, putting our ear to the ground to listen to people on the ground, not so much trying to listen only from the top. And through this, we came up with some themes from the interviews, from the workshops, and those themes were developed into propositions. And with these propositions, we met in Johannesburg in February, invited external stakeholders as well as our own team members, and we discussed these propositions. And out of these propositions have emerged the principles that we'll be sharing today. Now, just to say something about the principles, we've decided to focus the action of the principles above all on the funding ecosystem, because a lot of global health research, global health implementation programs are usually centered and driven by funding. And if we are able to introduce the idea or embed the idea of solidarity within that ecosystem, then we'll be able to influence and perhaps shift our understanding and practices of solidarity. So we're talking about researchers, implementers, funders, governments, civil society organizations at the micro level, at the meso level, sort of like national levels, and then at the international level, which we call the macro level. The goal is to say this, we accept and we recognize that many organizations by definition are not solidaristic. If you take a philanthropic organization that wants to do humanitarian aid, perhaps solidarity is not their main goal. Or if you take a government that decides to use international aid within the global health space, their identity may not be solidaristic. But what we can insist is that if global health is about people coming together, to stand together, to fight disease, to fight illness, then that is a solidaristic space, and anybody, irrespective of their identity, who wants to operate in this space must comply with solidaristic ideals. The principles, as we have them here, are not a sort of checklist. These are evolving standards of practice that need constant negotiation. And these are the ones that I'll be presenting shortly. Now, how do we use these principles? They are prompts for reflections for organizations, for different stakeholders, to ask ourselves, like, what we're trying to do, how does it reflect the ideas of solidarity? Or are we simply engaging all forms of extractivism or even forms of just like charity, which is about the powerful helping the less powerful, and therefore they are premised on power differentials. The principles will also serve as a catalyst for dialogue to continue to interrogate ourselves as we work in this space to see how we are performing. They can be normative reference points for structuring funding arrangements and research partnerships, and then to become a foundation for us to develop tools that actors can really use in their day-to-day activities. So what are these principles? These principles that we've identified are 9. We call them the 333 framework. And they are structured around what is solidarity, how is it practiced, and to what end. So when we think about what is solidarity, we just, even though there is no unique, generally agreed definition of solidarity, what we did with these principles was to look at the traits that were common in the different conceptualizations in order to emerge with these principles. And so what we're talking about in solidarity is action. Solidarity is not just about saying or feeling. It is about doing something, or at least stopping to do it. And it is standing with and for others. And this standing with is based on identifying with them, identifying or with their plight or with the joy that they are celebrating. And therefore, it is not premised on the difference, which sometimes charity does. And it is a specific type of relationship that involves caring. And it is practiced through mutuality. That is the how. Mutuality is not the same thing as a reciprocity or do ut des, I give so that you give back. But it is because we are together, we're fighting for an ideal or an aspiration or a goal. And for that matter, it is built on trust that everybody will do their part. And it also means that you just don't sort of like wake up one day and say, well, I'm out. And finally, in the how, we have solidarity requires respectful and inclusive engagement, because when we engage in solidarity, we all bring in what we can contribute in order to further the cause that we're standing with. And it does not mean that somebody who brings more of one particular aspect certainly takes the lion's share, because the goal is to achieve something that will be shared among all of us. And the end of all this activity in solidarity, one, it challenges the power differentials in global health. It pursues emancipatory ends. And emancipatory here, I mean, emancipare, and from the Latin, it means the hand that is holding some people down, we need to take off that hand so that people can flourish. And solidarity, therefore, is key in the pursuit of health, equity, and fairness, which are the core aspirations of global health.